We're on Daf Chavav Amud Aleph toward the bottom. We're learning as is chus for Shlema for Ilana Chaya Baserach. I think I'm gonna take Shira Bashalamis off the list for now because she's already home. She has a very long recovery ahead. But from what I understand, it's is she home? She's not home, but she's in the regular hospital unit. So, but they sounds like things are going well.
For sure.
When people are sick, it's a different thing, you want to know that they're cured, but this is recovery. So we're at the Mishnah on the bottom of Chavav Amud Aleph. Mishnah says, "Nasnu al gabi hakevesh sheloi k'neged hayesod." If you put the dam of a carbon, you didn't put it in the proper place. You put it on first of all, if you put it on the ramp, the dam has, we know that there's different places. Some goes on the top, some goes on the bottom of the mizbeach, some goes on the kronis, on the protuberances on the top of the mizbeach, but nothing goes on the keves. Nothing is intended to go on the ramp. We're just starting the Mishnah on Chavav Amud Aleph.
I think so.
Yeah. So you put it on the keves, which is not the proper place for the dam. That's not where the dam gets thrown. You throw the dam. You have this rikas dam with the chatas. You place it. But whatever the case is, the avodah of zrika you did in the wrong place on the mizbech. Or shaloi k'neged hayesod. When you put the dam on the mizbech itself, typically on the bottom part of the mizbech, there's a yesod, there's a foundation that goes around on the bottom of the mizbech, but it doesn't extend all the way around. And the din is that the zrikas hadam has to be opposite the yesod. So again, he put it on a part of the mizbech that's not the proper part. Not so nesanitin lamata lamayla vesanitin lamayla lamata. He did something that was supposed to be on top. He did it on bottom. Something was supposed to be on bottom. He put it on top. Vesanitin befnim bechutz. He did something that was supposed to. We have a couple of chatois pnimius that we learned about back in Hyrrius, right? The par halam davar shel tziba and the par kayin mashiach. That the dam goes on the inside. It goes on the paroiches. It goes connected the mizbeach. But the mizbeach hapnimi, and he did that on the mizbeach hachutz, or vice versa. One of the regular karbanis, he did the dam on the mizbeach hapnimi. Puzzle, the Mishnah says it's puzzle ve'em by karas. The din is it's not going to be kosher, and there's no karas for it. Now, this is very loaded. This is a loaded phrase. Ve'em by karas. Whenever you see the words ein by karas or yesh by karas, what you're automatically going to think about is pigel, because pigel is the difference between pigel and chutzlim kaimai is that pigel has karas. I just want to review once again just a very basic din of pigel. Pigel is when you have a machshava at the time of one of the avodas hadam. The person has a machshava to do some of the consumption of the blood or of the dam or of the basar, chutz lezman. He says, I'm going to, let's say there's dam that's supposed to be nizrak on the mizbech. He has in mind he's going to be zarik the dam that night or the next day. Or if he has in mind, if it's, let's say it's a shlamim, the shlamim is allowed to eat for 2 days, and which is the case that the pasuk talks about, and he has in mind he's going to eat that basar on the 3rd day. And the din is there's a chiv karas if one then eats the basar of such a carbon. That's what we're saying, karas. It's not for the person having the machshava. The person having the machshava is just the foolish kayin that we always have throughout kachim, that's always causing the trouble. But the problem, the person who eats it gets karas. So we say pasul ve'ein ba karas in the Mishnah. That makes us think that this basar, if he's going to eat it, we're saying that the carbon's going to be pasul, but it's not going to have a din of karas, which is going to l'chayra implicate karas, as the Gemara is going to explain a little bit later on. Okay, I just want to give you a heads up. We're going to be turning to this soon, but I'll just let you know in advance that there's a Mishnah in the next parak, at the beginning of the next parak, that says a very different, talks about the same thing of dam that's in the wrong place, and it says the yachzer v'yakavel. So that is going to be a big Indian that we're going to have to explain this theory. But before we get to that, we're going to have three different pshatim in our Mishnah, which are really all different ways of addressing this stira between our Mishnah and the Mishnah in Perek Beis. Sha'amar Shmuel, Pasal Basar. He says, although our Mishnah said that when you apply the dam in the wrong place on the Mizbeach, we said Pasal. The Mishnah seemed to say it, is just a standard Pasal, that the carbon is a Pasal of carbon. He says that it's not what it means. It means that the Basar is Pasal. That means you're not allowed to eat it. But Baila Miskapru, the Zrikas Hadam is effective, and it's going to be Yaitza. This carbon will have been done in the proper way. The only lasting effect of throwing the dam in the wrong place is that the basar is going to be asur ba'achila. When it said pasal, it didn't mean real pasal. It meant that you can't eat the basar. My timer, where does he get this from? The Amar Krav, Anina Sata l'chem ala mizbeach l'chaper. The pasuk says, Ki nefesh habasa b'dam hi. The nefesh of the basar is badam. You have to put on the mizbeach in order to get a kapara, and to the nefesh habasar in order that the basar al nefesh ki adam hu b'nefesh echap. So kiven sheigia dam mizbeach niskapru bailam. So before we get to the achilas basar, he says you get a kapara because the Torah said al mizbeach you get a kapara as long as it's on the mizbeach. All of the cases in the Mishnah, there's different shitas about this, but generally the Mishnah is talking about where you're doing it on the Mizbech, but in the wrong place. They're doing the Zrikas Hadam in the wrong place on the Mizbech. Shmuel says any place on the Mizbech is enough to get the kapara. So if that's the case, why are you saying that that you can't eat the basar? The Torah seemed to say that any place. The Torah gave its directions about where you should throw it on the Mizbech, but it sounds like if you don't do it on the right place, everything's hunky-dory. So now it shouldn't just be that the Baal is kaper, it should be also that you could eat the basar afterwards. So he says, Amakra lechaper. The part of that pasuk was, I only gave it to you that it's going to be good for the kapara, but not for other things, not to be mater the basa b'achil. So like the Gemara, we can deduce from this, Alma kasavar shaloi bim koime kim koimedam. You see from here that the bottom line of this is that essentially, according to Shmuel, that when you do a zrikas hadam on the wrong place, which is just really a summation of what we just said, it is a good nesinus, it's a good zrikas dam. But there's just one restriction that the basar can't be eaten. But essentially, it's a good nesinas dam. It's a good zrikas dam. Now the Gemara is going to ask from that second Mishnah, and I hesitate to do this, but because we're going to talk about this Mishnah in totality, I'm going to ask that we turn, or you don't have to turn. I'll read the Mishnah. It'll probably be easier to turn because it's a pretty long Mishnah, and I don't remember exactly which parts to skip. This is at the beginning. On Lamed Aleph, Amid Beis, this is the beginning of the next parak. It says, Kala psulin sheshachtu, any person who's possible to bring a carbon, sheshachtu, and he did the shchita and kshera. The shchita is going to be a kosher shchita. Shchita kshera bezarim, benashim, bavadim, betmeim, afil bekotche kotchem. Shchita can be done by anyone. There's no restriction on who does the shchita. Obavachli you tmeim, Noigim bebasa, you can't have tmeim touching the basa because they'll make a tummy. Lefikach, therefore, hein poislim machshava. A lot of this is going to come in our Gemara. It's going to be relevant soon. So therefore, if someone did a shchita who was a apostle for one of these reasons, I mean they're not really apostle. They're apostle to do avodah, but they're not apostle to do shchita. If they do it with a machshavas, a machshava of chutz l'zmane or chutz l'kaimai, that will also passel the carbon because they are doing a valid shchita. However, v'kulan shekiblos hadam, if one of these people who are apostle do the kabbalas hadam, that was all shchita. But if they do the kabbalas hadam, chutz l'zmane v'chutz l'kaimai, they do it with the machshavas chutz l'zmane or chutz l'kaimai. Im yesh dam hanefesh, if there's extra dam left after they did this Kabbalah, yachzar kosher v'yikabel. You got to do it again. You tried it one time with someone who's puzzle. You do it again with someone who is kosher.
But if they don't have a bad machshava, then it would be okay. It seems
No,
like
it would be no. If it would also, you'd also have to redo it. But the point is that it's not possible. It doesn't, in spite of the fact that there's a machshavas chutz l'zman and chutz l'mkaime, it doesn't passel the carbon that there's
Wait,
no
I,
redoing it.
I thought women and Yisrael can only do the shchita part, but any of
Right,
the
right. They
ma'akev.
can't. That's the point. Since they're doing an invalid Kabbalah, the machshava of pigul or machshavas chutz l'mkaime doesn't passel it. It just makes it that this particular Kabbalah was not effective. You gotta do it again. A Kabbalah by someone who's a apostle doesn't passel the whole carbon. It just makes that avodah wasn't done properly. So then you could if you have some extra dam coming out of the behemoth, you could redo it.
it's almost like it's almost like a kula. Like
Right,
Or
it's a chumrah that
or like
comes from
Lizzie,
kula.
almost like it never happened. It's almost like
Right.
if Yisrael does the shchita, it works. But if he does
Well,
any
a
of the other
kayin. You mean a kayin? Oh,
Yisrael,
shchita, right? Yeah.
if he does any of the ma'akev parts of the carbon in general, whether it's like we talked about any of those things, if he does halacha, it's as if it never happened. So
Well,
the
shchita is also ma'akev, but it's not ma'akev who does. It's saying
Right.
shchita doesn't. Anyone
Okay, the
can do it.
zrika. So if Yisrael goes ahead and takes blood out of the cup and starts doing zrika, it doesn't passel up the carbon that you've done. It just a client can still come and like almost fix it, or like
Right.
like
Redo
Liz was
it.
saying, it's a
Yeah.
cool. Masha'in can if a client does it with the wrong machshava, pigel, that makes the whole thing not go the chatchila.
Right. Then you can't go on, like we said. Right. We said this all the way at the beginning of the first Mishnah, that it's puzzle and you like shaloi lishma on a chatas and you don't continue at all. So machshav shaloi lishma for chatas and a pesach would be a similar thing like machshavas chutz l'mkaim or machshavas pigel. So weiter in the Mishnah, kibel hakosher v'nasan leposel yachsel lekosher. If someone was kosher was a kabel, he gave it to a apostle, he could give it back to the kosher. That's not relevant for us. All that wasn't really relevant. This is relevant minatzad. It's not going to be directly, but you'll see it'll be relevant on the next plot. That if you were already makabel the dam in a kli sharis, you did the shchita and then the Kabbalah, and then it poured onto the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, you could pick it up and redo it. Unlike what we saw before in the Mishnah, that if it went straight from the behema onto the floor, then it's you can't that can't be redone. It has to go straight from the behema to do Kabbalah. Okay, now we're getting to the part that's really directly negay, which is what the Mishnah brought it for. Nasna al gabe a keves. Shaloi keneged yisoy nasas anitn lamata lamayla v'sanitn lamayla lamata. Sin b'fnim b'chutzas and nitn b'chutz b'fnim. This is exactly what we said in our Mishnah. The exact same set of circumstances where the zrika was done not in the proper place, but in an improper place on the mizbeach. But now this Mishnah, which generally seems to be talking about whether you can redo something, says im yesh dam nefesh yachzar kosher v'yikabel. He says if there's additional dam, that means there was already the Kabbalah, but there's still somehow, right? They did the Kabbalah and the Zrika, and there's still somehow dam pouring out of the Makom Shchita. That's the dam, the Ikka dam, not the dam HaTamtzis and not the dam HaOyer. It's the actual lifeblood of the Behema, but still pouring out. You could quickly send the Kayin, go get new dam, and do it over again. V'yachshar Kayin v'yikabel. Could do the Kabbalah again. So Zok the Gemara. Frek the Gemara. Tnam beidach perkin. Nasan ol kevesh loy keneged yisai nasan nitn lamata lamayla v'nitn lamayla lamata v'nitn b'fnim b'chutz v'nitn b'chutz b'fnim is yesh dam hanevesh yachshar kosher v'yikabel. If there's still dam, he can go and do the kosher can go and do another Kabbalah. V'yisakadaytach shaloi b'mkayim kim kaimai. If you hold that shaloi b'mkayim kim kaimai lamali yachshar kosher v'yikabel, why is he going and redoing it? He already got a kapara. There's no such thing Why would you go ahead and redo something that already worked to get a kapara for the owner? And if you'll say, like we said according to Shmuel, that even though the Bailam gets kapara, but the basar is going to be asa b'achila, and we say pasal in the Mishnah, it means the basar is pasal b'achila, and now you're doing it again in order to be mater the basar. If you're doing a new Kabbalah and a new Zrika, but it's not getting a kapara, that's not going to be mater b'achila. You need a real Kabbalah and a real Zrika that's doing something. A Zrika cannot be done just for the purposes of being mater b'achila. So we have a problem, right? How do we understand that Mishnah if we say like Shmuel, that which we said from our Mishnah, Shmuel says from our Mishnah that whatever part of the base of the Shalebim Kaime is Kaime Dami, whichever part of the Mizbeach it goes on is going to make a kapara. If the Mishnah over there was talking by a case where a kosher person, someone who was able to bring the carbon brought it, a kosher kain brought it, ein a chanami, you would not do another, you would not be yachshav yikabel. So now if you remember when we saw that Mishnah, the Mishnah started off with that case of telling us that if someone someone was a pasul who did the avodah, if he has a machshavas psul, if he does the shchita, it's going to pasul. If he does the Kabbalah, it's not going to pasul because anyway his avodah is meaningless, right? So we're talking about the effect of having a machshava, someone who's a pasul does the avodah, and he has a different machshava. So, but we were talking about a pasul doing the avodah. So he says this end of the Mishnah is still talking about that same din. It's talking about it's not talking about where a kohen did the avodah in the wrong place on the mizbeach, the seif of the Mishnah. It's talking about where hacham mayaskin in the yaveh pasul. We're talking about where someone who was a zar or a isha or an eved, they did the zrika on the wrong place. So very much like we said with the Kabbalah, since it's a real avodah, even though normally it would be if the person was a kosher, the din would be that he gets a kapara, but it's not going to kasher the basar. Over here, it wasn't kosher at all. The person was a pasul. You're doing it in the wrong. You have two problems now, right? That it was a zar that did it, for example, and they put it on the wrong place on the mizbeach. So we say it's all useless. It did nothing. You could start from the beginning, and if there's more dam, you go and you do another Kabbalah, and then you can do another Zrika.
Meaning, if it was a kosher, there wouldn't be this rule that you do it again because there's no point.
It's not necessary.
It's only where the apostle did it. So
it's not necessary, and to the extent as far as the basar, it's not going to help.
But over here, we're talking about a case where apostle did it. So nothing. So there's no kapara. So now you're doing.
So you're starting fresh. You're going to get Correct the Gemara. Why is this going to work? How can you use the Rex Dam? The Tnan. This is in the same Mishnah. B'kulan shekiblu chutz lezmanei v'chutz l'mkaimei. This is on the top of the Yamid in that Mishnah. It said if any of these psulin they were makabel adam chutz lezmanei v'chutz l'mkaimei. We're medayik that it says that if they were makabel the dam, somebody who's a apostle was makabel dam chutzim zman and chutzim kamei. You can go ahead and redo it. But we're medayik from the Mishnah kiblu in zarku loy. The Gemara is saying that it's mashma from the fact that the Mishnah said bedafka kiblu. It didn't say if you did any of the avodas. If someone who was an apostle did any of the avodas with a machshavas chutzim zman and chutzim kamei, you go and do it again. It sounds like, but once you get to Zrika, it's only by Kabbalah this is true. But once you get to Zrika, my time, is it not because that once you get to Zrika, there is some element, you have already, it's close enough to getting to the end of the avodah that you can't go back. It's too late to go back at this point and redo it, since it was done on a part of the mizbeach that, shalebim kaimis can come. Even though it's done by someone who's apostle, you got far along enough that it's going to be matcha that you can no longer be chayz. And for the Gemara, no, that's not. That diak is incorrect. Lo mishum de pasal b'machshava. He says the reason why you can't do it again when you're zayrik is because it's only because it was a machshava that we say there's such a thing as dichui. That because he did the zurika with the machshava of doing it shaloi bim kaimei, that passes. But what we're talking about, which is doing
it.
I'm sorry?
I mean, when a apostle does it.
When we say someone, no, we're saying the shaloi bim kaimei. When a kosher person does shaloi bim kaimai.
But I'm saying versus compared to our case, it's not that there's no dichoy. In other words, it's only where a kosher did it that he makes it possible. It's nothing to do with dichoy.
No, it is a dichoy in the end, right? We're saying that there's going to be a dichoy when it's a person doing, it's not just because of the psul, it's also where it's a machshavas psul. That means only we're still accepting the difference, that there's a difference in Kabbalah, that Kabbalah is not going to be madcha, it's not going to passel the carbon for the future. But somehow like the machshavas psul intensifies the psul over here. We don't just say, okay, he's a apostle, a person that's doing it, and therefore we ignore it. Since it's on top of the fact that it's a apostle, a person doing it, it's also a machshavas psul. Then it's then that's matchet. This is not this. It's not the regular dicha that we always talk about. We say there's a dicha meikara dicha. If there was a time when this is talking about that there is a psul in the avodah. And this is somehow like a cumulative psul. We have both that it was a person doing a puzzle, and somehow we're saying this is a havamina. We're going to reject this in a minute, but that it will be a cumulative psul together with the machshava. Then a zrika you can't go back from. A kabbalah you could. A zrika it's already too much, and you're not able to be chayzer. But the Gemara asks, first of all, ihachi kabbalah nami. What's the svara that you should say that a machshava, even though it's a person who's an apostle that's doing it, will passel it that you can't go ahead and fix the problem by redoing it, but that's only applies by zrika, not by Kabbalah. If you're saying such a thing that machshava intensifies the psul, that it's unable to be redone, there's no logical reason to make a distinction between Kabbalah and zrika. In addition, the whole concept that machshava is going to make it worse, that you can't redo the avodah, seems to be incorrect. And this is a klal that you see throughout Kachim. Ein machshava me'eles. Machshava, and this is really what we started with our havamina before we went down this path. Ein machshava me'eles. A machshava to passel something, meaning a machshava chutz lezmanei, which is pigul, a machshavas chutzum koimai, or a machshavas shaloi lishma on a chatas and a pesach. Elu misha roy lavoida. It has to be a person who's able to do the avoida. Ubedavar haroy lavoida, and something that it's roy lavoida. Rashi has a little bit of a complicated explanation. He says it means. I think he says that it's referring to the wheat, the silas of wheat that you usually use for a mincha, as opposed to the barley, which is only used for the omer. It's not really used for karbanis. And a place that's roy lavoida, Rashi says, for example, like on a mizbeach that's fixed, not a mizbeach that needs repair, that's not capable of being used. But if you do a machshava with any of these kind of disqualifications, other disqualifications, it's not going to pass up. Machshava is not going to be effective. We're going to disregard the machshava, and it's not going to pass it that you can't redo it. So why are we suggesting that that's the explanation of the Mishnah later on, that we're trying to explain that according to Shmuel, the reason why the Mishnah says later on that you go back and do it is in order to because it was a machshava, and that's why by Zrika you can't go back and do it. By Kabbalah you could, and over here, and it's talking about a different case than ours. So the Gemara says Ela Ema. So we have to answer that. We have to answer that question differently. We have to go back and answer the when it says that Kabbalah you can go back and do it over. It doesn't mean but Zrika you can't, which was what caused us all our problems, because we said why can't you go ahead and redo it by Zrika if you did it on a different part of the mizbeach? Shalai ben kaimis can kaim. So he says no. The real inference is not supposed to be that you could do it by Kabbalah. You could go back and redo it in the Mishnah later on by Kabbalah, but not Zrika. But rather you could redo it by Kabbalah and not Shchita. Shachtulai. If you did the Shchita with the machshava of doing with a machshavas psul, and that was saying you can't go do it back. Because, like we said, a person who does the shechita is perfectly kosher. So he's having a machshavas psul, and at that point, you really mess things up. You mess things up in the right way. You were smart, dumb kayin. You weren't a dumb kayin. You did a good job of messing things up. I guess it was a psul. Maybe it wasn't a kayin altogether. Frak the Gemara.
You're literally separating it's one carbon, but different actions, it gets separated.
What do you mean, different machshavas or different actions?
Meaning that if he does it during the shechita, it's no good, but if he does it during this week in the Kabbalah...
Well, we know. We're talking about someone who's a puzzle to do avodah. So he's allowed to, he's doing the shechita, he's doing a regular, everything's fine except for his foolish machshava. But now his foolish machshava can take effect and ruin things. So that's the only mashmayis from the Mishnah over there. But Einachanami Zrika, since we say Shalai bim kaime is bim kim kaime dami, when the apostle does it over there, there's not going to be any reason, like we said, to go back. You'll get the kapara if you do it by the Zrika. What are you trying to tell me? That when someone who's a apostle does the shchita, his machshava will passel the korban tnina? We learned it in the Mishnah. They literally said this in the Mishnah. That was part of the Mishnah. There was a lot to remember, but one of the things it said in the Mishnah was that, therefore, since the psulim can do the shchita, when they have a machshava, it passels. So my time the Rava. No, Adarab, it's telling you the other way around. Like Rava says, that from Kabbalah and on, it's any machshava that they have is not going to be able to passel. And it's telling you basically this din of Rava, that any machshava that's taking place when there's other psulim is not going to be a psul. It's not going to pass. Okay, so going back to Rava's Shita. So Rava's Shita Rava's explanation of the Mishnah is that a apostle who does the Avodah, he does the Zrika on the wrong part of the Mizbeach, it's going to get a kapara, but the basar is asa b'achila. Meisvei. Chishav, this Mishnah is, where is it? There's the next Mishnah after that one, also in Perek Beis. Chishav litin es hanitna l'mayla lamata lamata l'mayla. Again, this is not a zrika. This is it says he did the avoida with a machshava. He did something with a machshava to do that which goes on top on bottom, that which is supposed to go on the bottom of the mizbeach on top. So it depends. La'alter, if his intention is to do this immediately, meaning he's doing, let's say we're going to explain what exactly he's doing. Let's say he's doing the shchita, and he's having a machshava to do something, to do the zrika in the wrong place. Now again, you can have a machshava zrika, which will be a machshavas pigel. Let me I just want to define one more thing, right? So again, pigel is when you have a machshavas chutzlas mane, that you're intending to do some consumption of the carbon, which could be the zrikas dam on the mizbeach, is the consumption of the dam by the mizbeach. So having a machshava to do the zrika at the wrong time is a machshavas pigel. Machshavas chutzlam kaimai, and that if you eat the basar of such a carbon, you get karas. Machshavas chutzlam kaimai is a person who has a machshava to consume part of the carbon outside of the azara, outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Even though we call it always chutzlam kaimai, as is going to become clear, that doesn't mean in the wrong place in the Beis Hamikdash. It means outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So chishav litin is hanidin lamata lamata. He had a machshava. He had, again, these kehanim were very foolish people. He sat and he thought about it. He said, you know what, I'm going to do this carbon chatas, I'm going to do it lamata. And he said this by the shchita. If he would have just kept his mouth shut, if you remember before, we had a Gemara that says kehanim should not say anything about what they have in mind, then there won't be any problems. But this guy had to declare to everyone, I know exactly what to do. I'm doing the chatas lamata. And so it depends. If he's going to do it la'alta, if he means it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, he means he's going to do it in an hour, kosher. It's kosher because he's doing it in the wrong place, but it's just a machshava, and anyway, yeah, we'll see. So that doesn't pass him. And even though, yeah, and it's not chutzlam kaimai because it's not outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Chazar, that we take out the next words, l'machar pasul. Chazar v'chishev, if he continues with after he does the Kabbalah, Chazar v'chishev chutzlam kaimai, he has in mind that he's going to do something chutzlam kaimai pasul. Then it's going to be pasul. Everything's fine. The first machshav he had didn't pasul because he was just moving from one part to another, and it's the same day. There was no machshavas chutzlas manai, so that's the second machshavas chutzlam kaimai will pasul. The aim by karas. There's no karas because it's only machshavas chutzlam kaimai. It's not pigel. Chutzlas manai. If he when he went back and rethought it after by his second avoid, instead of having a machshavas chutzlam kaimai, it says he has a machshavas chutzlas manai. Pilgul v'chayven of karas. Everything is kosher. So now whatever machshava he has in a later stage, the first machshava is done. It didn't affect anything because it was all going to be done on the same day. So the next machshava will pass.
So la'alter, why is it kosher?
Because he's not having a machshavas. That first machshava was not a machshavas pigul. It's la'alter. That means he's going to do it today. He's not having a machshava to do the avodah the next day. We want to avoid pigul, and now all we're left with is that he intends to do it in a little bit of the wrong place. That means even if you don't hold, this is whether you hold chutzlam kaimai is kim kaimai or not bim kaimai, that it's still not a machshavas chutzlam kaimai. The machshavas chutzlam kaimai has to be outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and doing it in the wrong machshava, he didn't do it on the wrong part of the mizbeach. He just thought he's going to do it on the wrong part of the mizbeach. That's neither machshavas pigul or machshavas chutzlam kaimai. This is the hapa you have to wrap your mind around. Even though we keep on saying Shmuel holds chutzlam kaimai is kim kaimai dami, that's a different mim kaimai than the chutzlam kaimai when we talk about the machshavas pigel and machshavas chutzim kaima. Chutzim kaima in that sense is talking about when you actually apply the dam. Chutzim kaima. So that's all when he had in mind for the same day he has in mind to do the zrika on that day. But if he has in mind to do lamacher, he's thinking, he's in the middle of doing the shechita, and as he's shechting, he's thinking, I'm going to be zayrik the dam tomorrow. I'm not doing it today when I'm supposed to. I'm going to do it past the time, chutz lezmanei, and I'm going to do it on the wrong place on the mizbeach. Puzzle. Then it's puzzle. Now, note that it doesn't say pigel. It doesn't say it's chayiv kares. It just says it's puzzle. Chazav v'chishev bein chutz l'zmanei bein chutz l'mkanei puzzle v'ein by kares. It's still not going to. We're not going to get kares. Now we'll get back to Shmuel. High puzzle pigelhu. Why are we saying it's just puzzle? L'chayra, according to Shmuel, wherever you put it on, as long as you intend to do it on the mizbeach, that's considered a machshava, a valid machshava that can be or not even a machshava. That when you put it on the wrong place, that's considered that you put it on the mizbeach and it's a niskaper. So it should be also pigel. That should make it pigel as well. And then we shouldn't even talk about what happens if he does another machshava. He already had a machshavas chutz l'zmanei, and it was already pigel. Amamazutra zika de sharia basa bachila ma'isel de pigel. Zika de sharia basa bachila ma'isel de pigel. He answers, no. Shmuel did not say that. It's true. He said chutz l'mkaima is kimkaima. If you do it on the wrong part of the mizbeach, the carbon is kosher. But he had one caveat. He said that you can't eat the basar. And he says, so therefore he says a machshava that would not result in koshering the basar does not bring to pigel. He had a machshava to do a zrika tomorrow. That would be a miskaper, that doing it in the wrong spot on the mizbeach would be miskaper, but it would not be mater the basar machila. That's not a machshava that can bring to pigel. Where do you get this from? Well, you're just making up rules as we go along. He says, no, I got a pasuk, the siv. This is the original pasuk, the basic pasuk of pigel. Pigel yeh. The Torah says, and this is really a abridged version of the pasuk. If you look on the side, if he's going to eat from the basar on the third day, that lo yeratza, he's not going to get a ritzui. Hamakravai say lo yechashev, lo pigel ye. It's going to be pigel. Now, even though the pasuk really sounds like it's talking about actually eating chutz l'zmanei, but we darshan lo yechashev to tell you that means when you have a machshava. But this is the pasuk, and it says ve'achal yachal mibsar zevach shlomav pigel ye. Misha pigulei garim loy garim loy. It's only someone that the pigel. The machshavas chutzim kaime is garmloi. Yatzazeh she'en pigulei garmloi. But over here, it's not the pigel that's being garim that you can't eat it. It was already that you couldn't eat it because of the fact that he had in mind to do it shaloi b'm kaime. El isser davar acha garmloi. It's because of the fact that he was doing it shaloi b'm kaime, meaning not in the proper place on the mizbeach. That's what asid it. So Gemara, ihachi ifsul nami le'lifsul. Says you have such a good pasuk that tells you that pigel won't apply where it's not going to passel, where the machshava will not passel ba'achila. Let's say it's not pigel at all. It shouldn't be passel altogether. So he answers, going. If someone would have according to Rabbi Yehuda, he has a shita that when you have any kind of machshava that would make the carbon passel, that passels. He has a broader version, like what we said before, that in order to passel, in order to get a din psul, you have to have either machshavas chutz l'mkaime or chutz l'zmanei, or a pesach, or a chatas shaloi l'shma. He says anytime you have a machshava that if you fulfill that machshava, it would passel the carbon. For example, he gives a machshava sinuach. He just intends he's going to just leave the dam. Not that he's going to be zarik at the next day. He's just going to leave it. Period. So that's not a machshavas chutz l'zman. He's not intending to do the zrika at the wrong time. He's not intending to do the zrika at all. He says that also passes. So he says the same thing over here. This would also, he goes like Rabbi Yehuda, that just once he has a machshava of doing it the next day, that already is a machshavas psul, that would passel the carbon, and therefore it passels. Since he's planning to do something with passel the carbon, it becomes passel right away. Okay. That is the end of Shmuel Shita. I guess we're going to have to leave for tomorrow morning, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
7:50?
Yes, 7:50.
Wonderful. All right. Good.
Very good. Shvach, everyone. Good luck.